And welcome back to the Terrible Conservative. As always, I'm your host, Ty420, your conservative stoner. And I have with me a great show. We have two presidential libertarian candidates that are going to debate it out today. We have Dan Taxation is Theft Behrman, and we also have Kim Ruff. What is up, guys? Thank you for being here.
Hi, Tyler.
Hey, how's it going?
Thanks for having us on.
Awesome. So guys, this is not an introductory video. You should already know who these two awesome people are. If you don't, I'm going to give them 60 seconds right now to tell you why they are running for president, and then we're just going to jump right into the hot issues. So Kim, ladies first, I will go with you. Why are you running for president?
Thank you. My name is Kim Ruff, and I'm seeking the Libertarian Party nomination for president in 2020. The reason why I'm doing so is that I want to ensure that the electorate has a bold, outspoken, unapologetic libertarian representative for the third largest political party in America. In my observation as an activist and a longtime party member, I have been frustrated with the fact that the person who's at the highest level seeking the highest level office has done a substandard job representing what we believe and showing how we're truly unique and distinct from Republicans and Democrats, particularly the current iteration. So it's important to me as an activist and a party member and a libertarian that we have someone who's a standard bearer for our message and is able to drive that home to benefit our down ticket candidates and our volunteers and activists at home.
Awesome. Very well said. Dan, Taxationist Theft Behrman, please tell us why you are running for president.
All right. So I am running for president because I've seen both sides. I've been a Democrat, I've been a Republican, and I'm not happy with either. There's a lot of great people in both parties, but the politicians and the leaders of both of those parties are trying to divide us. They're trying to pull us apart. They've always got something to sell us, to give us for free, whatever they can pander to us to get our votes. But then they always go do these backdoor deals that screws us over, that steals from us, that taxes us, whatever they want to do to get what they need, which is a vote. And I'm really tired of seeing these options. And so I found the Libertarian Party. I understood that they were kind of a different option, but I wasn't really happy with who they had to represent that. So I came out with my platform and I said, look, this is the way that we can do this. This is the way that we can make everybody happy. This is the way we can make every American get something that they want or something that they need to make their lives even better without having to steal from somebody else.
Awesome. Very well said. I don't like people stealing from me. So I like that. All right. So guys, we're going to jump right into it. We're going to go right to the hot stuff. We got borders, immigration, and foreign policies. Are you guys ready for this?
Yes.
Awesome. So Kim, I'm going to pick on you really quickly. So Kim,
Okay.
You have said that if elected president, you would move to abolish the welfare state and create an open border policy, which many libertarians also agree with. Now, understanding that migrants are statistically higher to favor and vote in bigger government with more services, as well as the United States being the largest destination country in the world, what would stop, say, communists or those seeking to increase socialist policies from entering our country and pulling us away from capitalism and moving more towards socialism?
That's a very good question. Yes, there is a higher probability of us having, if you have an open border policy, of people coming in with ideas or beliefs that are either antithetical or different than our own. That is the reality about blending in the melting pot that is America, is you're going to have that happen. But in order to prevent that, we need to adhere strictly to the documents that define and govern our country, which is the Constitution, and then you have the state laws. And those laws in the Constitution were designed to prevent the government from moving at a faster pace. They were designed to ensure checks and balances so that no one department or no one area had more sway over another. And that was what was going to prevent this sudden sea change of ideas. We were going to be overrun by a philosophy that is antithetical to the classical liberalism that our country was founded on. So you're always going to run that risk whenever you have people come into an area, whether they do it legally, illegally, or through amnesty. They're going to bring their own beliefs and culture with them. But it's your job to have a very strong culture as well, and to hold true to those values that created the foundation of our nation, that undergirded the foundation of our country. That's why you need to have people like libertarians who espouse classically liberal beliefs and do say things that are just like what our founding fathers believed. at the forefront and constantly pushing against it. Because you have Democrats who pander and you have Republicans who pander, and they both say how much when talking about any issue, to what degree. Whereas libertarians say, should we at all? And that is the conversation that needs to happen. So if you want to prevent that, and rather than keeping people out of the country, you need to keep yourself strong in your beliefs and principles.
Okay. Dan, same question, sir.
So I think there's a lot of different ways to look at this. First of all, a lot of people escape socialist countries and come to the United States, not because they want to turn the United States socialist, because they're sick of socialism. We have to look at that ideas used to be stopped at borders, but now we have the internet. So ideas are happening all over the place. We could very well, as the Department of Homeland Security already warns, Russians in dealing with our entire voting system and manipulating us with propaganda and everything else. Whether or not that's true, who knows? But it could be, because there are no borders on the internet. We could be getting our ideas from communist countries around the world as it is, and we would never know. So I think that, ideologically, we can't rely on borders to stop this type of thing from happening. Now, the other interesting thing is, when I talk about socialists and communists who want to come into the country, if we look at places like Cuba, for example, that a lot of people want to get out of there because the poverty rate and the quality of life is really low. Why is it like that? It's because of a lot of embargoes and programs that the U.S. government put in place that prevents them from trading. And when you look at a lot of socialist countries, and when you say, hey, we're not going to trade with this country because of that, then what you see is these things are actually preventing trade. They're actually keeping these people in poverty, and they're making countries worse and worse, and they drive them down into that, which makes people want to escape. So if we were to say, okay, look, let's start trading with some of these other countries, let's introduce them to capitalism, let's turn their countries capitalist because it's better for all of them and all of their people, then we won't really have such a huge problem of people trying to get out of those countries in the first place.
Can I continue on? Because I just love the fact that he touched on that.
Absolutely.
Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Okay. I'm glad you touched on that, because that's something that a lot of people fail to understand, is not only do our economic policies on the international level create those situations where you have impoverished nations that people are seeking asylum from, but also our foreign policy approach with respect to war. We create refugees by going into other countries, and then those refugees want to come here and seek asylum. If you really want to prevent immigration, like hordes of people from other countries coming here, the best way to do it is to eliminate, change our policy with respect to warfare and end up engaging in free trade with other countries so that they have the opportunity for economic improvement and growth. That's a really good way of just limiting the flood of people who want to come to this country. So I'm glad that you brought that up, because sometimes people forget that.
Okay. Okay. So then let's go with this one then. When challenging, and I will have you answer this first, Dan. When challenging Ben Shapiro's statement that most Muslims were radical, this is what Ben Shapiro said. I think he said actually that 70% of Muslims were radical. So when challenging Ben Shapiro's statement that most Muslims were radical, PolitiFact estimated through various studies, including the Pew Research Center, and that by applying reasonable criteria, 19% of Muslims was a fair estimation of being radical Islamists. So this would mean that roughly 160 to 300 million radicals mean to bring down Western civilization by force. Wouldn't our current border policy be better to ensuring that these extremists do not invade our nation?
I think that's you really got to look at those statistics and how they're collected, and you really got to look at who's all talk. I mean, there are millions of people in the United States who are talking online right now about the boogaloo and revolution and all these other things, and they're really all talk. They're upset about their government. They're upset about certain things. But whether or not they're actually going to go and carry out violence is a completely different story. So you might have a lot of Muslims in various countries that are saying like, yeah, those damn Americans, they disgust us with their filthy Western culture that drops bombs on us, and they should all die like pigs. I don't know if that's what they say, but like that
sounds about right.
So like, but it's like, if they came face to face with us, would they really be interested in like, yeah, so I want to move to America where all these filthy pigs are, and live with them until I can kill. No, like there aren't a whole lot of people. I think a lot of those people would actually be happy if we just stopped dropping bombs on them. And yes, of course, there are going to be people who are violent and who want, those things. But we also have to look at, a lot of these people have come into this thought, school of thought that they have now because they've lost everything. They have nothing to live for because things like their family has been killed by bombs from the sky. I've heard stories about them like they love going out on a cloudy day because they know the drones can't see them and they won't be dropping bombs on them that day. Like, it's really terrible to hear these stories. And that's how a lot of these people get really upset about the government. And we're sitting here complaining about how bad the government is. Imagine what they're saying over there.
Right. Kim, would you agree with that, or would you like to respond?
I absolutely do agree with that. I'm sorry, Dan. I agree with that again.
Stop it.
This is over. This is just...
No, I mean, that's really the fact. I mean, there's a difference between, holding beliefs or engaging in fiery rhetoric.
But do you understand? But do you understand the concern that many conservatives like myself see when we look at numbers like this? And I agree with what you're saying, Dan, that we have to look at how these things, how we're getting this research. But the Pew Research Center is a pretty reliable source of information, right? When you see things like this from reputable places and you just see numbers, and I'm just looking at numbers, right? I calculate that 1.6 billion Muslims in the world, and if what is that, 70,
right, but
71% or 81 or 70? No. Yeah, 81% of Muslims would be, peaceful people. That's great. But if this was correct and 19% were radical, that's a lot because there's 1.6 billion.
What does radical mean? Are they violent or are they just angry? That's a really important thing to look at.
This would be that they are violent. Well, when they did the research, right, they base it off of a number of things of, people that were doing Sharia law and that opposed American Western law in regards to their Sharia law. And they took into consideration certain areas that like Al Qaeda that have already vocally voiced that, they want death to America. So there's a lot of different, stipulations how they brought this together.
For the sake of argument, I'm sorry, for the, you go ahead, Dan.
I was gonna say, if they're voicing that, that's one thing. But I mean, if we're talking about 200 million people, like, have they killed 200 something million Americans? Or like that, those numbers don't add up. So if they're saying like, yes, we want to be violent, yes, we want to do something, that's until they've actually done something, like that's a completely different statistic. And not to just brush these off and say they're completely irrelevant and throw them in the trash, but I think that's an important thing to look at.
Okay, that's fair.
What I was going to say is, just for the sake of argument, let us assume that when this was done, these were people who were viable, legitimate threats. So your question was, can I understand why conservatives are concerned about that? Yeah, absolutely. I can understand why they're concerned about that. But my question to them would be, why is your solution to tighten the border rather than to actually petition your government to end these wars? If you want to have a situation where you have less people in the Middle East or Southeast Asia or North Africa angry at the United States asking and demanding for the death of our values and our people, then why would you continue to engage in warfare in those countries and continue to oppress them? Doing so, overthrowing their processes, putting in stooge government officials, using the CIA to do that, all of that has led them to become frustrated and to aggress. If you don't want to create radicalization, then you shouldn't meddle in other countries' affairs. That's the best way to eliminate it.
So this is really interesting because you're actually opening up for my very next question. So Kim,
I love a segue.
So Kim, you have said that the United States cannot take an offensive position before there is a problem. And Dan actually kind of just said the same thing, right? Now, while many modern conservatives like myself agree that we should not police the world, right, we also believe that we should not wait for a missile to be launched for us to eliminate that threat. Where do you stand on foreign hostile threats to our nation?
Well, my feeling is that It really is, it's sort of the same thing that we apply in our criminal justice system, which is not only do you have to have the intention, but you actually have to commit the act itself in order for us to enforce it. As libertarians, we believe that we have a right to self-defense, but that means that there has to be a direct use of force or fraud against our rights to life, liberty, or justly acquired property. If somebody talks about maybe wanting to sock us in the mouth, well, they're just talking. If somebody insults our character, again, that's just talk. If somebody's over there, like, I don't know, running a knife against, a strop, like trying to sharpen a knife or something, and they say, I'm going to kill you. Well, then if they try to come at me, I have the right to shoot them. But they have to actually try to attack you. It's not sufficient evidence for you to just say, just because somebody's angry or just because somebody's in a foreign country and they're exploring these means of weaponry, that somehow they're going to aggress against us. Maybe they're exploring these means of weaponry as a matter of self-defense, which, considering the fact that we're the biggest aggressor on the international stage, is justifiable, in my opinion. So yes, it has to be a direct act of aggression and only in self-defense.
Dan, I will have you answer the same question, sir.
Yeah, I think there's, even in personal common law, you have a clear and proximate danger or threat is kind of the threshold for using self-defense. Let's look at the Second Amendment, which a lot of conservatives like the Second Amendment, right? If you see somebody walking down the street with their gun on their back, whether it's a rifle or, they're carrying, however they're carrying, do you go up and say, oh, that's a threat, he's got a weapon, I'm going to attack him so that I can be safe? No. So just because somebody's building a missile for self-defense against a country who's been bombing them for decades isn't really an act of aggression. It's also, something that we need to look at is if somebody's, I don't know if I can think of a great example on the spot here, but if somebody's threatening you and they're not a real threat, and believe me, I've had so many threats myself. Like, do you really need to go start a fight if they're not a threat? I mean, some little guys, so let's say a 5-year-old kid is coming up to you and saying, I'm going to kick your ass. What do? Do you just knock him out cold?
Knock him the fuck out, bro. That's what I do.
Talk a 5-year-old.
What if he's like one?
I mean, I'm 5'7", man. He's probably almost going to be my height anyway. I just got to knock him out.
But I mean, that's the thing. Like, you can look and maybe if he like grabs onto your leg and he's trying to punch you in the nuts or something like crazy, then okay, yeah, go there. But I mean, realistically, if a kid comes up to you, like, how aggressive are you going to be towards, like, how credible is that threat? And we have to look at the same thing, like when North Korea is launching missiles and they're like not going anywhere. That doesn't mean like, I mean, yeah, we absolutely should make sure we're on peaceful terms with them, but that doesn't mean like, oh, they're building a test missile that can't even get off the ground, let's just nuke them. Like that's a complete like overreaction to what's going on.
I think that's fair, and I actually think a lot of people don't bring that up when they debate this topic, that you have to see if it's an actual credible threat to have that. However, I will challenge you guys because I don't know. I definitely believe, and a lot of conservatives believe, that we need to neutralize threats. I don't want that missile in the air before I'm saying that, okay, we're going to shoot it out, we're going to declare war, we're going to do whatever, right? If you are vocalizing, if you were standing in front of my house, right? If you were standing in front of my house and you said to me that you have a gun in your pocket and that you are about to pull it out and you are going to shoot and kill me and my family, I am not going to wait until the bullet leaves the gun. At that point, I'm dead. My family's dead, right? The second that you even inch to make a move, that's when I take that as a hostile threat, right? So I think that it's not, I don't think that it's bad to apply that also on an international scale.
Right,
well, no doubt. I mean, if you have right. I was going to say, I'm like, if you have a situation like, say, where a country says we declare war on America, well, I'm not going to wait until they have their boats
But what
on
is
our
that?
shore.
What is that exactly? What is I declare war? You don't have to say I declare war to declare war, right? You don't have to say those words.
Yeah, and I think that's probably where we end up getting into the gray area of that one, because what does qualify as a declaration of war?
Right.
Is it a declaration of war to, disrespect our president? I don't really think so. No, not really. I mean, it's disrespectful, but that's not a declaration of war. So
to be completely honest, if you talk about my man's hair one more time, we are going to bomb the shit out of you. If you make fun of my man's orange skin one more time, it's over. It's just over for you guys. But no, that's fair. That's fair. That's fair. Okay. All right. So libertarians love talking about some drugs. Let's get into some drug policies, guys.
Okay.
I like talking about drugs. Drugs are fun. Okay, so drug policy. Right, sometimes. Right. Right. As we've discussed, sometimes it could get a little real. So, okay. All right. So drug policies. Let's see here. The war on drugs has been an absolute fail. Countless Americans have been imprisoned for non-violent drug offenses, many of which were victimless, as the person in question was not found to be selling drugs to anyone else, but only having it in their possession. What would you do to combat future generations from these same penalties? And is there anything that you would do to help those that are currently imprisoned now? And Kim, I will go to you first.
Okay. Well, I'm really glad you brought this up. I don't know that there's going to be a question you bring up where I'm going to be like, I wish you didn't bring this up.
You're glad I brought everything up.
I'm just really glad. No, yeah, so with respect to drug policy, absolutely libertarians are proponents of decriminalization of all narcotics. And the rationale is because of the fact that there is no harm that has been inflicted on anyone else, and that you, as a person who has body autonomy, can ingest, imbibe, or shoot up or smoke whatever you choose to. So we absolutely reject the war on drugs, not only because of the fact that you're penalizing people for using narcotics, but also because of the fact that you're stealing from the public in order to fund these programs, and you've created a greater police state, and you've created a greater prison industrial complex as a result of it. Now, in the federal branch, which we're seeking office, the executive branch, what we're going to do about that, I'm sure, and I'm speaking for Dan because I know he's going to agree, is that we are going to ensure that anyone who is serving time in a federal penitentiary is going to be released, because if they are indeed guilty of a quote unquote victimless crime. So that would be people who are there for narcotics. As far as what can we do for them, I don't know that we would be able. As a libertarian, I'm not an advocate for restitution, because I think that is, again, continuing to perpetuate a harm by stealing from the public and using it to give to somebody else. So I don't agree with that. I wish I could, because it is incredibly cruel, the amount of time that's been taken away from these individuals.
Right, but also, I mean, what they did at the time was a crime. Whether we make it not a crime now or tomorrow, it still was a crime when they committed it, right?
Yeah, it was a crime at the time that they committed it, even if it was wrong, and they were found guilty and sentenced, and they were serving their time. What's interesting to me, and we are actually talking to a coworker about this, is, you have situations where states do indeed either decriminalize or legalize certain narcotics, and yet the people who are still serving time in state prisons for that still continue to serve time. They're not just like released once the law gets changed, because the assumption is that they are guilty of a crime that they broke then. So regardless of how the culture or the law has shifted, they still need to serve their time. But I find that really bizarre, because if we can agree as a culture now that this is permissible and acceptable and that government shouldn't dictate, shouldn't anybody who's serving time for that quote unquote crime that's no longer a crime be released immediately?
Absolutely.
This is just something, yeah, I would think so. It makes rational sense, and yet they're still serving time. So from the position that we're seeking, the best that we can do is obviously push people at a local or state level to petition for those individuals to be released. But we can't really do that at a federal level, of course, unless they are a federal prisoner.
Dan, I'll have you answer the same question, sir.
So I would say, because this has happened before, this isn't the first time. We had alcohol prohibition. Possession of anything is not a crime. Let's think about, I'll go to an extreme. If somebody was murdered and you're in possession of a bloody knife with that person's DNA, the crime, you're not going to be charged with possession of a bloody knife. You're going to be charged with murder. If anything, possession is evidence for another crime. But simple possession is never, ever, ever. I mean, think about it. That's what they're doing that's how they're eroding the Second Amendment, right? They're turning simple possession of a certain type of firearm, a certain type of magazine, a certain type of ammunition into a criminal offense. And this, maybe a constitutional amendment is the way to go on that, because clearly, I mean, the Ninth Amendment really should be protecting it, but clearly that hasn't worked because nobody even knows what it is. So we do need to release all the prisoners. We do need to, above and beyond that, expunge their records so they don't have to, have you ever been arrested? They should be able to check no on that. Restitution, I agree with Kim, but I kind of want to say maybe there's a way. Like maybe there's a way we can, we have criminal elements in the police departments or in the justice system at different levels. What if we were to have them pay the restitution to the victims of the things that they did, which were essentially criminal? And we can say, okay, yeah, but they were following the law at the time because they did break the law. But yeah, so was Rosa Parks. We can't look at a crime and say, I mean, when a law is written, sometimes it goes to the Supreme Court and people say, yeah, this law is garbage. It's unconstitutional. Let's throw it out, and nobody can be prosecuted on it. If we look at those laws, simple cannabis possession laws are technically unconstitutional, I would argue, under the 9th Amendment. And so that means we should throw out all the convictions. We should throw out all of the criminal history that everybody had on it.
Right. Yeah, that's fair. I mean, honestly, if something is no longer illegal today, then that means that, our peers decided that this should not have been a crime. It just should never have been a crime. So if it shouldn't have been a crime, then we need to let these people out. However, I would argue that just by letting a flood of hundreds of thousands of people out of prison at the same time without trying to figure out how it's going to work, I don't think that would be the right thing. I think that we would need to find a way to get them released properly. But yeah, I would agree that those people need to come out.
I got a question for you. So you're worried about 100,000 people coming out. Let's say these are all nonviolent offenders, and there's 100,000 of them, and you're worried about.
Well, let's say that they were nonviolent when they went in. Prison doesn't happen to be that rehabilitating. So,
okay, fair point. But let's say we're only releasing the ones who are still nonviolent.
Okay.
And yes, we have an issue. Okay, because we don't know what these people are going to do. Would you still have an issue with saying, okay, there are there was 9 months ago, somebody had a really huge party, and today we're being threatened with 100,000 babies coming into this country today. Would you try to figure out some way to say, well, hey, we need to test the waters with this? How do we, that kind of gets into the abortion question, which I'm sure you're against.
Super against.
Yeah. So, it's that same kind of question. Like, if they never should have been in there in the first place and you have no reason to believe that they're going to be violent, what reason would you have not to release them?
That's fair.
Right. And if we're going to ensure that their rights, the right to vote and the fact that they, the records are expunged and they basically get a tabula rasa, they'll have more opportunities at their disposal. So, but yeah, I do want to know where my invite to that party is. What party was that?
I don't know what party that is.
That was the Boogaloo.
There's probably lots of cannabis there. That's all I know.
Whatever party it happens to be, it's Charlie Sheen is throwing it. Charlie Sheen is throwing it.
Might have been the Area 51
I'm
party.
out.
The Area 51 party. Next question. Will you storm Area 51?
Well, I wanted to. I think they took it down. Was that a serious question?
No, that was not a serious question. But if you would.
Be like, Dan Behrman, we'll answer all questions.
All right. What
I actually said before Bernie Sanders announced the other night that he'd tell us if aliens existed. That was my whole thing. Like, you wouldn't need to storm Area 51 because
isn't that crazy how he's trying to use that to gain presidency?
Oh,
right? Well, hey, I was trying to use it.
You know what? I am tempted though. Like, I'd like to know if the aliens do exist, but I don't know if we want to go into socialism for that.
Yeah, I was joking with my campaign team about that because I have actually had people ask me, like, are you going to tell us about the aliens if you get elected president?
Why don't you?
And I'm like, yeah, if I see one. Well,
yeah, why don't you just promise something crazy, Kim? Just promise something crazy that will never happen just to get votes. Just do that.
Yes, let's do it.
Okay. All right, and Dan, this is specifically to you, man. Specifically to you. You are very vocal about your views on drug legalization. Almost in every video, I find that you are very vocal on it. Now, while conservatives are split regarding certain drugs being made legal, you would support all drugs being made legal. Former Libertarian candidate Gary Johnson even expressed that only marijuana should be made legal to the public. What would stop an owner of these new drugstores from selling cocaine, methamphetamine, or really drugs of any kind to minors? Additionally, Would you support a bill that made drug sales to minors federally illegal?
Federally, I would say the federal government has absolutely no place in here. But let's talk about the hard drugs. Let's say you're conservative and you have a kid and he's going to high school and he gets mixed up with the bad crowd. I know that would never happen to your kid, but let's just say that that happens somehow,
Basically, your kid gets mixed up with me. That's basically what that is.
right? And maybe he tries weed, maybe he tries something stronger like meth or heroin, and he gets in trouble with that. He's at a party with a bunch of friends and he overdoses. Do you want his friends to get paranoid and drive him around in a car and drop him out on a corner somewhere? Or do you want them to be able to drive him to a hospital? If he gets caught in public somewhere with them, do you want him to get arrested and have a criminal history and lose all of his chances of getting into a decent college? Or would you rather the police send him home to you so that you could give him a good slap on the wrist, have a serious talk to him about using these drugs, and that's the end of it? The reality is this war on drugs is absolutely detrimental to everybody that it affects. And while they say they're putting these things in place to protect people from using these drugs, they're not. They're not concerned with this at all. Look at the drugs that are on the market that are available from big pharmaceutical companies, and you'll see a lot of these are much more dangerous, if not exactly the same, as some of the drugs that we're worried about people using recreationally. The question's been asked before, if heroin were legalized today, would you go out and use it? No, most people wouldn't. Actually, nobody that I know would who doesn't already use it. And the point is that, it would be absolutely like terrible publicity for someone like CVS to go say, hey, we're selling heroin now because it's legal. So we have so many different things in place that it's absolutely impractical and illogical to believe that, hey, heroin's going to be sold on every single corner and everyone's going to be abusing it. That's not the reality.
Okay, so to answer the question, then you would not support a federal ban on that, right? And you would not stop the owner from selling it.
Yeah, I don't think there's any cause. I mean, if anything, there's, it's an interesting question. How do we regulate the sale of alcohol, which I absolutely hate that we have taxes on it, but most people won't sell alcohol to people under 21 because of laws. Some people will. There's kind of always been that. There's always been a secondary black market. I remember the first time I got beer was, we were 18 and we gave some money to a guy and he went in and bought beer for us. There are ways around these laws, and I think when a business's reputation is at stake, and they're first of all, if you give drugs to a kid, that could be seen as a crime in and of itself, whether or not you took their money. That's a crime. Like, it's not something that you might need an actual law to look at. And where's the gray line on that? That's questionable. But if you're hanging around outside of a school delivering drugs to everybody, I think it's pretty obvious that could be covered under a common law, that you're passing toxic, damaging substances to somebody who's obviously not going to be able to handle it. That's a complete that's a different story. Okay. I guess that's a gray area, but I don't think the government needs to get involved in a lot of this.
Okay. Kim, I'll have you answer the same question.
Okay. On a federal level, no, I would not support any legislation like that. That's something that comes down to a state powers issue, and states can determine that and whether or not they are going to expect business owners to adhere to that. But coming from the libertarian perspective, it's always a better idea to permit the free market to decide, which is if people want to patronize a business that is known for selling narcotics to underage kids, which, by the way, Dan, the crime you were thinking of is contributing to the delinquency of a minor.
There you go.
Yeah. So, but yeah, if businesses...
I was thinking like child endangerment there.
Yeah, or that too. Absolutely. I mean, if you can, it's so interesting because a lot of these things that come at from the perspective of being a mother. I have 2 kids, they're 5 and 6. And from my perspective and knowing what I know about child development and the evolution of the human brain in just the course of our lifetime, I think it's incredibly ill-advised for anyone to use narcotics until their brain's finished being developed. But that's something where, as a parent, I need to be honest with my children about what narcotics are, what the kind of effect it's going to have, and that they really want to stay away from it until they're at a point where their brain is developed before experimenting. But if they do choose to experiment, I also want them not to suffer lifelong repercussions, as Dan pointed out. which is if they get caught, they go to jail, they serve time. If it is legal, they still have the possibility of having that on their record or being mistreated as a result of it or losing opportunities, which is going to perpetuate that cycle of addiction. So there is that aspect to it. But as far as businesses are concerned, it's up to individuals in the community to determine whether or not they want to patronize a business, knowing that that's a policy they have. I personally would not patronize a business if I was aware of the fact that they were selling narcotics like heroin to underage people. In fact, I wouldn't patronize a business if they were selling heroin in the first place. I just think that's
right, exactly. Let's just stick to that.
Right, I just think it's incredibly irresponsible. So that's how I tell them through my paycheck, I'm not going to endorse or support their business. And that is a really big signal to, businesses, whether or not they're going to be successful. They want to earn money. People won't support it. They're not going to earn money.
Okay. So just to be clear, you would not support a bill that introduces it federally to make that illegal or, propose something, add it to the Constitution or whatever that may be. Right. And you would not stop private owners from selling drugs to children.
Correct.
Okay. All right, guys. Well, we talked about some good stuff. We talked about borders, immigration, foreign policy, and drug policy, and all of this good stuff. I want to have some. I want a closing question from you guys. If elected president, just tell me, what can you promise to the American people? And you know what, Kim? Let's go ahead. Let's start with you.
Okay. Now I'm just thinking about all these dope sick minors out there now. Okay, again, to reiterate, my name is Kim Ruff, and I'm seeking the Libertarian Party presidential nomination in 2020. The reason why I'm running for office is because I want to ensure that we have somebody who engages in personal responsibility and self-ownership in that significant role. If I am indeed elected president, I promise the public writ large that I will not do anything that extends beyond the bounds of the constitutionally defined limitations of that role. It doesn't matter what my precedents have done. It doesn't matter, or what my predecessors have done. It doesn't matter what I could possibly achieve if I use the amount of authority that's currently vested in the executive branch. I will not go beyond those bounds. And the reason why is that because maybe for once, it might be really nice to see somebody who sits in that position who actually knows what the position is and adheres to its limitations out of respect and deference to the American people.
Very well said. Dan, your closing statement, sir. What can you promise to the American people?
So I think it's really important to understand what the government is and what its role is. And its role is not to steal from all of us, to build this corporate type structure that continues to grow. We look at businesses and we expect businesses to always be growing and to increase profits. That's not what the government should be doing. But of course, that's what it's been doing. Every year we have a new agency, we have new regulations, we have new taxes, everything else. It's always trying to grow and expand its profits and expand its control. And we should expect that it should not do that. So the first thing I want to do is stop stealing from people and start shutting down some of these departments that should not be there, that are not helping anybody. We need to start looking at government as something that's supposed to help when there's a dispute between people or between states, and not something that's supposed to be there and solve every single one of our problems. What we can do, especially with a president who doesn't want to break the law or doesn't want to violate the Constitution, is we can have somebody who can look at the problems and offer solutions without having to have the government go out and actually solve them, but offer solutions that individuals can solve on their own. With their own efforts. And I think that's the best way to have a peaceful society where nobody's stealing from each other in order to get what they want. I'm Dan, Taxation is Theft Behrman. My website is Behrman2020.com, Behrman 2020.com. And my middle name is Taxation is Theft, which I changed by declaration, not by petition, because free men don't ask for permission.
That is awesome. Guys, everyone, make sure that you check their links. All of their links will be below in the description. Links for you to donate to them, to their campaign, to follow them. If you are as dope as me, they might agree to come on your podcast if you are a podcaster. But I don't know. Don't hold your breath, because there's not a lot of people out there as dope as Ty 420. But guys, thank you so much for being here, Kim. Thank you so much for being here, Dan. It was awesome being with you guys. And everyone else, catch me on my next podcast.